Douglas Murray and Mosab Hassan Yousef, the son of a Hamas co-founder, have emerged as two great truth tellers and moral heroes in this time of moral chaos. Here they are talking about the Israel versus Hamas situation and sharing some really important truths. Have a watch.
I remember speaking with you almost 10 years ago now, after a set of attacks in France, in Paris. There was the Charlie Hebdo attacks, the attack on a kosher supermarket, then the attacks when dozens of jihadists rampaged through Paris, massacred people at the Bataclan Theatre and the stadium and coffee shops. And I remember then asking you about, what does it take for the West to wake up to this reality? Because, you're aware of this reality because you grew up in it and you saw it firsthand, and you were a very unusual person in thinking your way out of it, which, is incredibly unusual. I would say that most Israelis today understand the reality that there's a group or groups of people who say, we want to kill you, and if they get the opportunity, they do. But the rest of the West seems to me, even all these years after we spoke about it, still is in a sleep. What would you say to Emmanuel Macron, Rishi Sunak, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris? What would you say to them to communicate to them that this is real?
One of the biggest contributors to terrorism and violence actually hypocrites. Because when we are hypocrites, we're not calling things for what they are. We see the Islamists' threat. We see what they're capable of doing. And when I say CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, other intelligence services in the West, most democracies in the West, they know the ideological dimension that motivates terrorists and terrorist attacks. But we prefer not to talk about it because it's Islamophobic, or because it's controversial, or we may offend the Muslims. So now we're submitting to their intimidation when we don't talk about it, when we don't challenge it, that this is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. Life depends on diversity. And the different is appreciated. Yes, we should have human discipline because we are not animals. But also we don't want someone acting as a sword of God, because then everybody would think that they have this authority, and the only outcome is bloodshed. We have the Muslims who live in the West, and I think there is no problem with that in principle. But don't enforce your religious identity, and when they do, we have to counter it. Like, for example, we cannot separate church and state and allow mosque and state to be united. We cannot just stay asleep while watching the Islamic hubs produce more extremists. And today, we have so many Islamic fanatics who actually preach through social media, through YouTube, and they are based in London, they're based in Paris, and they don't only advocate for a peaceful Islam, actually they're just preaching very dangerous, radical ideologies, the Muslim Brotherhood ideologies that is anti-West, that is anti-civilization, that is representing the 7th century mentality as an alternative to the modern world. And they are protected by the freedom of speech. But there has to be a limit to where you can preach such sick ideology. And I think most of the leaders are afraid, whether they are ignorant of the topic or they have short-term interest and they don't want to compromise this interest. They don't want to offend Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia or like Qatar. They have their own calculations, but in the meantime, we cannot hide from the challenge, because Islamists are in the West and they are waiting for an angry cause. And this is the dangerous thing about the Palestine. This is why one of the reasons that I came back, and I came very strong against the pro-Palestine, because it's not about Palestine. There is no such a thing as Palestine. It's anti-West, and it's looking for an angry cause. Yeah. And the more anger they are able to generate, they're creating the climate for those individuals who have been waiting to act. So I don't want to say, what are we waiting for? Like another major terrorist attack? Then we are going to understand that we have an enemy within. I hope we don't get to that point. But let me tell you something. From my personal experience, when they start first shouting from the river to the sea, calling for Jewish genocide, it was no time before chaos. And it became suicide bombing attacks, became stabbings, it became mass shootings, it became, everywhere became a target. And Palestine is chaos. Islam is chaos. And of course, this is very hard to say, but I hope that we don't get to the point to see the things going completely out of control, to realize that we have individuals among us that we really need to leash, that they cannot take advantage of the freedom. There is a limit. You cannot advocate on behalf of terrorists and terrorist ideology by the name of freedom of speech. It's not acceptable.
You can't use freedom in a society to shut down freedom.
Yeah, absolutely, but because it's very hard to draw the line, and many people take advantage of this. Take, for example, after 9/11, Muslims went into the hiding for almost a decade or more than this. They just hiding their identity. And after October 7, it was just next day they start demonstrating against Israel and against the West.
In New York, in London, in Paris, everywhere.
Within a week, they showed so much aggression. And again, this is the bloodlust that I told you about, which is very strange. You look 9/11 and you look October 7, and what's after? Totally different outcomes. So why all this? And this hatred against the Jews that is attracting actually many Westerners who might have something in common, that they are all anti-Semites. And this is what's bringing the Islamists and the communists and could be the socialists even to work together. They have something in common, and that is their hatred towards Israel. But what many Westerners are not understanding, that this is not only anti-Israel, it's anti-success and it's anti-civilization. It's pro-chaos. This type of individuals and this type of movements, they thrive in chaos. They don't like order. In order, they die. And this is why they want to see more of the chaos.
They really do just get it. They get it. They understand what's going on. They understand the root of the conflict, and they don't try to dress it up as, some kind of not such a big deal, and, speak with political correctness and say that, if we just have a bit more understanding towards each other, or maybe they just have a legitimate grievance, if we just kind of placate them a bit, things will be fine. They look at the truth as it actually is. This is one of the things that Douglas Murray talks about. He says that the Israeli youth, the fact that we've seen so much bravery among them, just incredible. And the fact that they actually tend to be more cautious, conservative-leaning, aware of the real threat of jihadist Islamism in a way that the Western youth don't seem to understand. He said that's because they've had to confront the truth in a far more real and meaningful and tangible way than many people in the West have. So you can afford to indulge in delusions when you're in the West and not facing the reality of this. You can afford to create fantasies about, it's just victimhood that's going on with all these Islamic extremism. They've just been victimized, and that's what it's all about. Israel has to face the reality. They've realized that it was the peaceniks, the left-wingers who were seeking a two-state solution that Hamas attacked predominantly on the southern border on October 7th. You know, I remember learning a line from a rabbi that maturity happens by necessity. Israel's been forced to mature the youth, and they've shown incredible bravery. So they realize this in a way that the West doesn't yet realize. And Douglas Murray said, you know, he's worried, he's cautious of that maybe something terrible will have to happen to wake people up in the West. But, you know, one of the things that I want to touch on as well is that how are we going to bridge this gap between the West and the Islamic world? Because many people think it's going to be one has to win, one has to lose. What if actually there could be a way in which both sides can come together? Because the when I say come together, I mean move towards a middle point. And what do I mean by that? Not that we should compromise with the demands of the Islamist side. But what I mean is this: the Islamist criticism of the West is it's vacuous, it's shallow, it's secular. The Western criticism of the Islamic world is it's extremist, it's dogmatic, it's just extreme and fanatical. So this is where I think it's very dangerous that Israel says, you know, we're the bastion of the West, or as Netanyahu says, of civilization in, you know, the Middle East against barbarism. That is true. It is civilization against barbarism. And yes, the West was built on principles found in the Hebrew Bible, but we are not the West. We're Israel. We're the Jewish people. We may have inspired the West, but we have a different view to the West. We're meant to be God's chosen nation, chosen to spread his Torah to the world. And if we come into that role, the Islamic world will respect us a lot more. They think we're some kind of foreign Western European colonial entity that has no place to be there. If we explain, no, we really are the Jews of the Torah, and we're here because of divine right, not because of international law or anything like that, I think they'll have a lot more time for us. And the Jewish people in Israel, their destined role is to bridge that gap between East and West, between Muslims and Christians, to show that there is actually a middle path, a middle ground, that the Torah always had in mind. On so many of the issues that they debate, the Torah actually has a incredible divine middle path that allows for us to bring God into our daily lives, but not in the way that leads to extremism and fanaticism, but leads to goodness, meaning, and wholesomeness. And there's so many examples of that. One example is the whole idea of separation of church and state. In the West, they said, nope, there's going to be complete separation. In the Islamic world, they said, no, there's going to be complete unity between political control and religious control. Judaism, the Torah said, of course religion has to infuse the leadership of a country, otherwise it's going to become immoral or it's going to become not rooted in God's values. But there has to be limitations, there has to be separation of powers. That's what inspired the separation of powers among America, among the founding fathers. They were inspired by the Hebrew Bible. But as in so many areas, Torah provides divine wisdom of a middle ground, and that's what the Jewish people are there to provide, that kind of leadership. We can be the bridge between the Islamic world and the secular Western world. We can be the bridge between East and West, and Israel is literally geographically positioned there to be that. That is our divine destiny, and it's going to unfold inevitably. Before we finish, I just want to share with you something really important. We are told that Israel's actions are the cause of the Israeli-Arab conflict, but we've just released a groundbreaking documentary proving that Arab Islamic Jew hatred far predates Israel's re-establishment. This is a critical fact that everyone needs to learn about. Have a watch of our trailer for our new JTV Plus documentary entitled Arab Anti-Semitism Before Israel's Re-Establishment. Picture yourself, it's 1834 and you're a Jew living in Tzfat, which is a northern city in Israel, then under the Ottoman Empire. Your family is part of this ancient city's spiritual heart for generations. You study Torah, you trade in the market, and live quietly among your Arab neighbours. But one day, a mob storms your street, shouting, "Kill the Jews!" Your home is looted, your synagogue burned, your loved ones beaten. This isn't about Israel. Israel won't exist for 114 years. This isn't about settlements, the IDF, or the 1948 displacements. This is raw, violent hatred aimed at you for being a Jew. And it's not just in Palestine, it's part of a centuries-old story of anti-Semitism woven into Arab and Islamic history, from the dawn of Islam to the streets of Hebron. The claim that this conflict began with Israel's creation, the Nakba, or modern policies, is a farce, a distortion that collapses under history's magnifying glass. Welcome to JTV Plus. I'm Ollie Annisfeld, and today we're uncovering a history too often buried, the relentless anti-Semitism among Arabs in Palestine before 1948, rooted in a broader Arab and Muslim hostility that began with Islam's inception in the 7th century. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.